Hi people, how you doing? My name is Hayo and I'm with these guys, Stringify. Welcome again to this tutorial. On this tutorial, we'll be looking at how you can create command button for your model-driven app, all right? You might have need for command buttons to perform some activity on your model-driven application, which in turn could actually be your Dynamics 365 applications also, which are built on top of the model-driven infrastructure, all right? So we'll be looking at that in this tutorial, how to create this command button and how to also make sure that the Power Platform is listening to that command. So when you create the command button, make sure it is active and ready for use. And then afterwards, we can write plugins on the buttons. We can write, actions and all of that on that button. But first, how do you create the button? How do you bring the button into the Power Platform? And how do you make sure that the button is active and being listened to by the Power Platform? That exactly is what we'll be looking at in this video. So sit back and follow me on this journey. Everybody, let's go. All right, welcome everyone. All right, so in this tutorial, we'll be looking at what we call command button. Now on your screen, you can see a model-driven application, okay, for Power Apps, and then you can see that there are different buttons at the top here, which are called command buttons. So we've had people reach out to us asking that how can we bring in button here and make them, functional and active. So what I'm going to do in few minutes is show you how to bring in a command button here, and then show you that the button can be active, all right, in this case. Then in subsequent tutorials, we'll then make any of those buttons perform a specific action. But for this tutorial, I'm just going to show us that what the button can, how to bring in the button in, and how to make sure that the button is recognized by the model-driven application. After which, you can now decide to use the button for whatever activity it is you want to use the button for in this case. Okay, now the very first thing you would do if you want to bring in a command button is one of the favorite ways is, if you have a solution that you are currently working on, right, is to go into your solution. So for in this case, I'm just going to take us to one of my solutions. So I have this solution here, which was exactly the solution we used in one of our previous tutorials where I talked about scripting here. So in the solution, you want to create some sort of API. Now, the idea is bringing in a button. They are web services, they are APIs. So there has to be some sort of listening parameter. All right, parameter for request and parameter for response. All right, in this case, which is then where you can build a few other things you want to do much later on in this case. So the first thing you will do is to go around. We're just going to create a new and custom API. So go to new and then go and look for custom API. All right, custom API, and so we'll create some sort of, let's just give it a name. All right, in this case, so I'll call this, don't forget, we have to make sure that we bring in our unique name, okay, our unique name based on your publisher. So I would say let's just give this button any random name. Let me say change button. Let's just call it change button, maybe something like that, change button. All right, now can just give it names that are just popular. Just copy all of these and then just paste them across board. Let's just paste all of this, and then I'm going to, so it's asking me, am I mapping this globally or to specific entities, tables? So I can just map it to an entity, or if it's something you want to do for a specific action in the entire environment, you could do global. All right, it's just your table binding or entity binding. How do you want to do it, local or global? All right, so I'll just do entity in this case. All right, and then it's asking me which entity do I want to bind it to. So I'll just do PTA underscore. In this case, I think the entity we're looking at is project. Yeah, I would believe that project. Let's see. Where's that? Just for a minute. Okay, and let's check the entity name so we're sure of what we're doing. PTA underscore project. Fantastic. So I'm going to map it to that particular entity in this case, and I'm going to leave every other thing the way they are. Now, much more later, when you now decide to write a plugin or something like that for the button, you can bring in the plugin here. All right, but for now, I'm just going to save this. So after creating this API, this is your API. You now need to create two important elements, which is your request parameter and your response parameter. So your request parameter is what are you requesting? What activities do you want to request with that button? And then what activities do you want to return from that button? In this case, so let me just save and close that. Oops, okay, let's go back there. Okay, we're still in the project. Let's do a refresh on the page. All right, so you can see that we have our API here now. Good. All right, so now the same approach, the same way we went through the first edition, we'll go ahead again and then create a request parameter and response parameter, custom API request parameter, custom API response parameter. Okay, so here you just give a specific name for your parameter. All right, just give it a name. All right, in this case, so I would say this is my custom API, and then I need to bring in, can you see the change button? That's the API we created. And then for the unique name, which is the API name, really API name, I could just give it any random name. Let's call it maybe, let me look. Since it's a change button, we can actually call it change. All right, let's call it change. I'm just going to pass that in here. We can make that a string. So you need to declare, so depending on what you want to, the kind of parameter you want to pass in. All right, you pick the parameter type here. All right, so with that done, I'll just do a save and close. And then the next thing I want to go do is create the response parameter. Okay, so create the response parameter the same way. I'm going to go to new, or that, and then custom API response property. The same thing as response parameter. All right, so we'll create that in this case. So I'm going to pick the API, the same API, which is change button. I think change button. So we can pass in, let's just pass in say our operation ID, something like that, for the unique name. I can say call it change actions, something like that. Just call it change actions. Just pass that in. I don't have to do that here. Just call it change actions. All right, and I can use a sequence as, so we can use integer, just like a sequence, to maybe do a count for it or something much more later in this case. Okay, good. Now let's click on save and close, and I'm going to publish all customizations. So this is just me creating it from a solution perspective here. So the next thing is to now create a JS function, a JavaScript function, to be able to interpret this specific activity that we've done here. If you remember the last tutorial we did on client scripting, we had a function we were working with then. So we just I could just go ahead on that function and add a bit of code line to that particular function in this case. Okay. All right, great. So customization is published. Now let's go to Visual Studio Code. All right, let's go down to Visual Studio Code and then write the function, create the function that is going to make Power Platform sort of understand that this particular command needs to listen for this set of elements in this case. All right, so commands that will make it listen for all of those elements we're looking for in this case. All right, now I'm just going to go back to our code. Remember, this was we did a scripting recently. All right, if you didn't watch the tutorial, you can go back to see that tutorial and why all of these are there. All right, these are there because we are creating some namespaces and we have event handlers. All right, and this was already mapped to the specific table form that we want to pass this current function on top. Okay, so we're just going to bring in that function here now to help us run this set of activity. So I'll create a function, say call it change button. Yeah, I'll call the function change button function. I'll create a function around it. Now we'll bring in our execution context and call it primary control. Now this primary control is an executable sort of function that command button that command button in Power Platform definitely do understand. Okay, so these are something you just want to bring in. All right, so let's bring that in. Now in between here, we now need to create some elements. So, but before we do this, we need to first set the parameter, and then based on that parameter we're setting, we can now come passing the exact function we require here. So just before this, I'm going to call in, let's say, let's call it change button request, some sort of request here for this. All right, and then let's bring in a function, and then in that function, the first thing is we need to bring in the ID of the entity. So I'll say project. Since we're looking into the project table, call in the project ID, and then our request parameter, I think we labeled it change, if I remember, change. So let's call change in here now. All right, then after that we'll now declare some kind of entity variable so that we can bring in the entity name that we're trying to work with here. So I'll say this dot entity, yeah, equals to let's bring in entity type, yeah, the type of entity in this case, and our entity is the let's do PTA underscore project, I believe. That's our project entity, and what we're querying with is the ID, and then the ID we're querying is the exact ID above. I'm writing a wrong function. Yeah, ID, and then my ID is the project ID. Project ID, cool. All right. Now, then let's call in the response parameter, right? So I'll do this dot change, and I'll call it change. So I'm saying that what our response parameter, our request parameter is change, and we're mapping it to a specific word change that we can use much more later. Then we now return the metadata of that element. Return the metadata of that element. So I'll do get metadata. All right. Now this is the idea. Most of these functions that I'm writing are static functions. All right. So that means if you want to do yours, if you want to create your own button, all you probably need to do is, depending on what your entity is called and your entity unique name and all of that, the idea is just you can write the function exactly the way I'm writing it, just making sure that you are linking your function to your entity. The idea is your Power Platform solution or system must understand the code, and then the code understanding the Power Platform function is calling in the entity, unique names of your tables and all of that adequately in this case. So calling project ID as the ID of the table, which is the unique identifier of that table, calling the custom API we created in here earlier from the entity. Can you see that? That exactly is what we're doing here. So look at that effectively as you follow through. Okay. So all right, so I will do return here, and then so in returning, I need to do a bound parameter. Remember when we were creating our custom API earlier, we had to do a bound parameter, right? A bound entity parameter here. So now I need to call that activity out here. So say bound parameter. Yeah. is what? Entity. So we're talking about an entity here. That's the bound parameter here. Okay. And then the parameter types. Parameter types would be this. So parameter types will be entity. So entity. All right. Just a moment. Let's see. Entity. Okay, good. And then the parameter type name. So I need to put the type name here. So here for the type name, we're going to bring back our table unique name. However, don't forget that we're looking at Power Platform, so we need to have a call to it has to be bounded to the Power Platform instance, which is like your CRM instance. So MS CRM is like the generic use of binding an entity to Microsoft Power Platform. So not Power Platform, not PP, anything. It's MS CRM. That's how you synchronize with the Power Platform. If you need to pull in web services from the Power Platform, you might go through xrm.web-api, xrm.this, crm.this, and all of that. crm web-api.this. If you're writing plugins, you have to do crm something, crm web API, and all of that. So those are generic. Like I said, they are static. They are generic and static elements that appears when you're writing functions, scriptings, plugins for the Power Platform system. Okay, so in this case now, I will bring in my PTA underscore project right here, PTA underscore project. Okay, and then I'll just give a structural property to be say okay. So structural property, okay. Just give it a standard figure just for now. Structural property to be this, and I'm going to close that line of code out. All right, good. Now, so that's for the entity. So I've done the bound parameter for the entity. Now I need to do the bound parameter for the API. That means letting the code understand what kind of data type, right? Don't forget that's what we're doing. What kind of type is the so-called API, all right, that we're trying to write in this case. So I'll call the guy in, which is change, right? And then I'll declare the type name just like we did above. All right, so in this case the type name here. So now what's the difference here, everybody? When I was doing for entity, you see that for entity we have it as more like a direct declaration. All right, in this case more like a direct declaration in this case, so non-primitive. So this is like non-primitive. So for the API itself, it's going to be primitive. So it's more like a key and a value, JSON format in this case, right? So type name, and then we'll do, let me say, CDM. So these are standard use of word. No, not encoded. Let's do this. Yeah, a string, and for the structural property, I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, let's make this one, which is primitive. Good. All right, fantastic. Let me see, what am I missing? All right, so the next thing we then want to do is declare our operational type, right? In this case, our CRUD, our operational type in this case. So I'll do operation type. I'll set that to, so if you have, let's say to 0, just do that. I'll set it to 0 in this case. So this represents an action. All right, so 0 will represent an action, 1 can be for functions, and then 2 can be for CRUD. These are standard. So I can say I'm using 0 in this case for an action. All right, this is the action I want to perform. Is a change action. I'm switching. Maybe I'm changing item from one place to another place. Right. If I want to represent function, for a function, see, for function I can use 1, and then for CRUD, maybe create, read, update, delete, stuffs like that, I can use 2. So stuffs like that, you can use that to represent your operational names. So I can just do operation name, and for operation name I'll call my my API itself, and I think that should be change button. Yeah, change button. All right, good. Let's close that out, and then let's close every element out. All right, good. So this line of function, or this line of code here that we've written here, all right, so the major function of what this is doing is this is the logic that we invoke that API with what we've created in the solution. All right, and if you look at it, they are in 3 forms. Form 1 is declaration itself, declaration of the entity, the table, declaration of the API, and then second part is the bound parameters, so setting their types. All right, in terms of what type is the API, what are we looking at in terms of the entity itself. All right, and then the third part is just what setting up what kind of operation is it. Is it a functional operation? Is it an action-based operation, or is it a CRUD operation? And that's what we've done. Now, when you have now done this, you can now pull this information here, because here now is where you now write the exact function required on the button, whatever button it is you are trying to create in this instance, right? In this instance, as the case may be. So let's just write something very basic. All right, something very basic here to see. I'll write something basic. See how if you can output some sort of status of 200 or 204 to show that the button is active and recognized in the system. All right, once you can do that, then we're good to go. So let's write a little bit of function, an action to validate that the button is active. All right, good. So the first thing we'll do is we need to get the form out. Remember, just if you follow the tutorial for the client script, I'm sure you know what form context is. And then I will invoke the primary control here. Primary control, good. And then after that, we need to declare a variable for the project ID. All right, in this case. All right, and then we'll say that what we're getting from that, we'll get the form context. Get your form context. So you see how you are bringing in your form. Now this time around is different. If you remember the last tutorial we did, when we wanted to perform an activity on the tab, we brought in the UI and then we brought in the tab. Right, in this case we brought in the UI and then we brought in the tab. Let me show you something from the last tutorial. If I expand this particular line of code, see, we brought in the form, we brought in the UI, we brought in the tab. Now this is the interesting things, guys. If you're probably you want to work on the control, you would have done form context UI, and instead of tabs you'll have done for a control, change the tab to control, something like that in this case. Now for this particular one we're working in, we'll bring in the form context, so the function here will be slightly different because we're going to bring in data, see, and then entity. So you see what we're looking at here now. So because what we're trying to achieve is replacement, so it's a change button, like changing one data output to another data output. So I'm bringing in the data and I'm saying from the entity itself is where that activity should happen. How? Get the ID. Are you seeing that? Get the ID and then do the replacement. Are you seeing? So get the ID and I'm saying replace. All right. And for that replace, I'll just do some sort of dummy, some sort of open instance just as a dummy. All right, open this. Let's do, okay, I'll do this. All right, and I'll say should replace. All right, replace. So, and I'm just going to repeat this. Let me just repeat that. Copy, Control V. Just this time around, I'm closing the. All right, good. Okay. All right, excellent. So I've created the variable for the project ID and I've mapped it to a form context, and I've so I left the source item and then the destination item open. All right, in this case, so these are the items. So you're getting an item, you're closing the item. That's why we have this open. Now, with that done, we now need to invoke this element above. We need to invoke it and create it as a variable also. So I'll create a variable for the change button request, So let's call it change button request. All right, I'm just going to bring it back in here, but this time around I'm just going to remove that particular underscore out of there. All right, so the change button request, brought it in, and then now create it as a new method. And how do I do that? So don't forget that we already have a direct method that is communicating with our platform, this guy that we used earlier here. So I can easily bring it in, copy, paste that line of function here, all right, and map it to the change button request. See that? So map it to the change button request, and then I'll just pass in my project ID. All right, pass in my project ID that I declared earlier. Declare this somewhere here. Let me do this. Okay, project ID. Okay, let's bring it in here. All right, good. Project ID. And then let me just say, or maybe what I wanted to do is admin change. Just change something. Maybe admin change. Okay, good. So now with that done, we can now go ahead and then use that request object to now execute our function. You see, so this request object now, we can now use it to execute our function. And to execute that function, we now need to communicate with the Power Platform here. So that's when you now need to talk to the Power Platform using XRM. XRM. Let me just hold on. So let's do this. XRM, good. I'll do dot web. So what I was talking about earlier, everybody. So this xrm.web API .online. This is like a nugget package. So this is like a nugget package to the Power Platform. So I'm saying XRM, what I want to do here is execute, use this request object to execute a function. So function execution. So I want to do function execution here with the request object above. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to achieve here in this case. Good. All right, so now let's do that. Execute. All right, and then I'll bring in that change button request. I'll bring in the change button request. Good. Bring in the change button request, and I'll say then the function goes in here. And what is the function? So bring in the function, say the results. Based on the results, do this. If the result is okay, that means if it is 200, something like that, yeah. If the result is okay, then or let me say if the execution is correct, something like that. If the system understands the result, then output this. Remember, this was how we tested on in our scripting in our last tutorial that we did. So I can now say status. Status should be. So this is where it now tells you status equals to 200. Are you following that? Status equals to 200 based on the fact that what the parameter we've passed is okay. All right, is okay, either 200 or 204. All right, it just gives you a positive response. All right, in this case. So for the sake of this training, this is what I'm trying to achieve, showing that what if we click on the button on our application, at least show us that status equals to this. If it is not showing us, so let's see. Let me just pass that word so that it gives us the text of the status. So results dot status, let's say text. All right, so it gives us maybe 200, 204 thereabout, and that shows us that the button is working. Or even if it is, the button might, even if the status is 400, 401, at least it means that at least when I click on that button, it is sending a request, and that means that button is listening in this case. All right, so that's what we're doing here. Now, apart from this, we now need to do some sort of listening. All right, the operation itself that we're trying to achieve. So we now need to perform the operation itself. All right, operation. In this case, to perform that operation, I'll get the form UI, okay, and then I will then say, set the notification. So that's what I'm trying to do. Set the form notification. Let me do set form notification. All right, good. So whatever the status output is in this case, okay, which is the result. So it gives us the results. So we are still saying the same thing, okay, based on the operation status, and then gives us the information that we need. All right. And what if it fails? What if it fails? So if it fails, we can just tell it to do function and then give us error instead of the result this time around, error. All right, and then it should output an error message. See that it should output an error message. So let's just do error.message. So this is going to be a JavaScript error message. All right, from our application UI. In this case, just directly from our application UI. All right, in this case, so I'm just going to close up this function and then close up this function. So look at what we've done here, everybody. So we first invoke a request, custom API request parameter and all of that. So we invoke that, and then we now write the function to say, you know what, get the primary control. That means the primary control is the button, right? You will see how we are going to map it now. That's the button, get the button. So when it gets the button, then the next thing is we're saying that from that button, we are getting we're getting this button based on an entity. So we are passing your entity here, the ID, and then on that entity, we're now doing a replacement. All right, so this is all this replacement that you're seeing here will be done on a plugin instance if you're writing the plugin function, but I'm not doing that in this tutorial. All right, after doing that, we're now seeing that the request we want us to do here is a change button request. Get the ID and then perform the admin change. The admin change here is whatever change it is we are coding into this later on. Then in doing that, you're not going to do it. You're going to do that on the Power Platform instance. So we're invoking the Power Platform nugget here. All right, for the change request. So when you now do that, we now have the function to say, when we click on that button, when we invoke that activity by clicking, if the result, if it sends that information back and that result is good, then output a result for us. All right, status equals to 200, 204, which means it's okay. All right, that's what you're seeing here. Else, if it is wrong, show an error message. So when we go test it now, if we click on the button should show us okay, or status equals to 200 or 204, which means the result is fine and good to go. If it is wrong, it should show us an error. If you click on it and nothing happens at all, it means that what this function is not working. All right. So you need to. So when you're bringing in the button, you need to create a listening party like this, and that is what you're seeing on your screen that I've done here, a listening party in this case. So when that is in, you can now use other methods, maybe scripting method, plugins, and all of that to actually now write the function that you want to achieve on your button. Maybe you want to use that button for cancellation, for changing parameters, and all of that. All right. So let's go see whether what we've written is good. So I'm going to save this, and then the first thing we'll do, everybody, is to go back to our solution. All right, and we need to update that web resource. Remember that web resource? We need to update the web resource by bringing in that particular script again, just the same way we've done in the last. If you missed the tutorial on scripting, please kindly look for the tutorial before, probably so that you can understand some of the things that I'm saying here. So I would save that. Good. Let's go. So that is saved. Now, once you have done this, the next thing is, don't forget, we have bounded that particular logic to an entity. So you want to go open your application, whatever application you're working on. So you go to your application, edit your application, your model-driven application. In this case, I'm going to edit it in new tab. Okay, good. Edit it in new tab. All right. So once your studio opens up, just like mine, you now want to go to that particular entity, that table you're working on. All right, and then on the ellipses, you want to edit command bar. So when you do edit command bar, it takes you to the entire command center. It's going to ask you, do you want to do it based on grid, forms, and all of that? In our case, we're working based on forms. So I'll select the main form, and I'm going to edit. Now you can edit subgrid and other things. Okay. So I will do that. So you can see that these are all the command bars that you normally would have on your application. These guys here, yeah. So you can see that you're able to see them on the back end. And then you see that if you notice, every command bar has a library mapped to it. So there's a library powering your command bar, and you can see the bound parameters are primary controls as understood by the system. Like I said, you can see that the library you're querying are XRM libraries, and you can see that they are JavaScript oriented scripts. See exactly what we've done: scripting by JavaScript, Nugget library from XRM, and then you have the primary control, so to say. Good. Now in our case, let's bring in our own button. Now I can bring in our own button. How? We now go to new, and then we'll just do command. So it's a command button, and it's asking us, is it powered by Power Apps functions or by JavaScript? We've written JavaScript here, so I'll just click on continue, and then you can see the command button is here. I like where it is, and I'll just change the name to change. Let's call it change button. Yeah, see, change button. Can give it an icon. Let's just pick any of the existing icon here. Let me type if there's anything like change here. Manager, change nothing like that. So we're just going to pick any nice button that looks like change. Okay, this is area switcher. I'm just going to use this. I like that, so let me use that in this case. Now, so once you've done this, the next thing you now want to do is, you see, your action is JavaScript, then your library. When you click there, you now need to select your library, right? But you see that our library is not existing here. So in this case, you do add library, and then when you do that, just put your publisher in. So your publisher will return all your libraries for you. All right. In our case, if I do PTA, definitely it's only our script. So we're just going to add the script that our script already here. All right. So our script is here. Then the next thing you then want to do after adding your script is just like we did earlier. Okay, is now to add your function name. And this time around, what is your function name? Exactly what we did on the code on our code earlier. So I'm just going to copy this guy here, but the difference is now when I copy it, I'm not copying it to the end, because the function we're trying to pull in is this change button function. All right, the change button function is the exact function we're trying to pull in here. Let's format the selection. So okay, so I'll go back to my Power Apps here, and I'll just drop that function. I'll do dot that will be change button, right? Let's go check it. change button. Okay, so I will do change button. All right, excellent. So you see that, and then it's asking me for the parameter. So you see, I will just scroll down and I'll select the primary control. All right, which is exactly what we had on our code instance earlier. So you select the primary control, and for the name, I can literally just give it a specific name I want on the tooltip. Where's the tooltip I saw earlier? The tooltip title. Let's just call it change button. All right. So what else? So you see that we've added our library, we've added our function, we've added our parameter, and everything we need. So we're literally good to go on this side of things. All right, on this side of things. Let me see. Hold on. I'm just going to see if there's anything else we need to do. Okay. So let's save and publish. So that's the next thing. We just save and publish. All right. Good. All right, so you see now that we have our change button as part of the element we have here. Now we'll go to the app and then let's go check if what we've done works. All right, so we're just going to track back to the application and I'm going to do a quick hard refresh here to check what we've done. Okay. All right, so now, everybody, you see that our change button is here right now. Okay, you can see the icon. Wow, is this the icon? Okay, all right, but anyways, we can see it here now. So now this is the test of things. If we click on this button according to our code, status should be 200. We should receive that notification information, right? We should get that notification somewhere above here that status is 200. If it's failed, we should also receive an information that it failed. If we click on the button and nothing happens, then it means that what we've done is not working effectively. Okay, but if it shows 200, then it means the button is live and active. So I'm going to click on the button right now, everybody. Fantastic. So we see that what status is 200, so which means the button is listening. We can even inspect element, all right, to see what we have. Clear. Okay, good. Console clear. Let me do a refresh on the page. You see that one of my last work is still working. Clear. And I'm click on the change button. Good. Status is 200. Can you see that? Status is 200. And you can see the script powering it. So now we see that the button is listening. So you can now determine to say, you know what, when I click on this button, an email should be sent. When I click on this button, it should change this from progress to maybe something else. When I click on this button, it should close down there. So we can now write functions on that button to exact a specific actions. So those kind of functions can come as a direct script, can come as a plugin, as the case may be here. All right, but this is how to bring in the command button on the Power Platform. You could go through the code I wrote. All right, this is the code here. So some of my codes, I'm going to deploy them to GitHub for us to be able to have access to them in case you need to have access to some of these functions. So they are static functions and straightforward functions, and that's the idea of what they do. So the idea is this function you see on your screen is just a listening function to help your button listening, or your command button listen to parameters that will be added to it much more later on. Thank you everybody for watching the tutorial. I believe you've learned something. In subsequent videos, we'll definitely write plugins on that button and then make the button active and perform a specific action, as it were. Thank you for watching this video. We'll see you in the next tutorial. All right, bye everyone. Wow, I believe that video really did help you, right? I know we went through quite a lot of processes and steps, all right? But you will understand that in terms of implementing the button API logic, that structure is constant when it comes to the actions itself, what the listening activity of the API parameters require. Also, that process we followed is also in most cases similar. All right, so you can always try the video, try the tutorial, copy out the code and all of that. You could get it on GitHub as I'll be and then try them out, create your buttons, and then from then we can start writing notifications, writing plugins and all of that on those buttons. All right, and I'll be creating subsequent videos to actually make that button active, right? Like see how we can use that button to then perform specific actions on the model driven application. All right, if you like this video, you might want to go ahead to like the video, share the video, and then subscribe to this channel. We're on a journey together, and I would love you to be part of this journey. All right, thank you for watching the video. See you next time in the next tutorial. All right, ciao everybody, and keep learning. All right.